It's your boy Luke here for our course breakdown, this time for the Players Championship. We're coming off of absolute carnage at the Arnold Palmer Invitational. I happened to be there on Sunday, was able to see that in person, and oh boy, that was beyond major championship conditions. That was borderline unfair, as a lot of players echoed, but to be able to see that in person was extremely entertaining. If you didn't hit the ball in the fairway, you were pretty much looking at bogey at best. So that's the type of golf that I like to see. And now that we're going into the Players Championship, which is also a really tough track, albeit a little bit more fair. Of course, you're not going to see scores that are like 9-10 over par, like what we saw there on Sunday, but you're still going to be in a little bit of trouble if you don't have your best stuff. It's by far my favorite week of golf of the year. The Players Championship was the first golf event I ever went to, and quite frankly, why I fell in love with the game. Just Pete Dye is an absolute masterpiece savant when it comes to course design. In fact, he's my favorite designer of all time. All his golf courses are pretty much masterpieces, whether it's Kiawah Island, which of course had the PGA Championship, my favorite course on the entire planet. This course is in my top 5. It's my favorite PGA Tour event. I also love a lot of his other creations. Just pretty much every piece of land that he gets his hands on ends up being just an absolute gem. A few weeks we'll be over there at Austin Country Club, which is another one of his designs for the match play tournament, so look forward to that. But in this video, we're going to be covering everything you guys need to know about TPC Sawgrass, whether it's going to be the field. We're going to talk a little bit about the makeup of the field, the cut line, that sort of stuff, some course details. We're going to go hole by hole through TPC Sawgrass to give you guys an idea of the strategy, also some of the looks and thoughts that these players are going to be going through. Also our key stats for analysis, our comp courses for our analysis, and pretty much everything you guys need to know, like I said. So whether you're a seasoned golf bettor, somebody who's playing DFS this week, or just a casual golf fan, you're going to have all the research you need to do your thing. With that being said though, we have a lot to talk about. Let's go ahead and hop right on into it. All right, first off with the field for this week, it's by far the strongest field in all of golf, even including the major championships, because there aren't those qualifiers or those people that automatically get to play, like at the Masters with the past champions, or the US Open qualifying, or even the Open Championship Open qualifying, where players from all the international tours also get spots. And it's not really anything against those players. I'm sure they're still up to par. We get the top PGA Tour players in the world playing this event. It's just another level of golf, as we've talked about countless times here on the channel. Don't get me started once again, but it's like AAA in Major League Baseball, the difference between those tours and then what we have over here in America. And it's really just easy to identify who's not here rather than to say who's actually playing this week. We have 48 of the top 50 in the official World Golf Rankings teeing it up this week. The two major exceptions being Bryson DeChambeau, who's of course injured, still trying to recuperate, and Harris English, who I don't know if he's had the surgery yet on his hip. He maybe has, maybe is about to have it done at some point, but either way, he's also recuperating from a pretty serious injury there. We also have a few other exceptions like Phil, Tiger, and Steve Stricker, who weren't inside the top 50 but decided not to tee it up this week. And guys like Ricky Fowler, who's actually an alternate this week. He's the 5th alternate as of right now, has a very small chance to get into the field. I would say it's extremely unlikely, considering the prestige of this event. People usually tough out injuries to try and play this, so it really does show you the extent of the injury for somebody like a Bryson DeChambeau or even a Harris English, who we know is going to be out for quite some time. In total, there's 144 golfers teeing it up this week, with the normal cut line rolls of the top 65 and ties making the weekend. It's a little bit early in the week, but it's really looking like weather is going to be a factor here. So I would say that the cut line is historically in the -1 to even range. We've seen it -2 before when conditions were extremely easy, but like I said, weather is going to be a factor. On Thursday and Friday, we're looking at pretty heavy doses of rain, which for somebody like myself that is going to be there in person for all 4 days isn't necessarily ideal. It's also going to make conditions play longer, right? When it gets super wet, it's going to be easier to hit greens, throw darts in there, but at the same time, it makes the course play 400 to 500 yards farther at times. So we'll have to see that. And then on the weekend is where it really gets dicey. We're gonna have a little bit of wind during those rainstorms as well, so that's also going to cause a little bit of trouble. But on the weekend, we're gonna have 40 to 50s in the temperatures in terms of degrees Fahrenheit, not Celsius, which of course is going to be extremely cold, especially for Florida. I'm gonna have to be bundling up there on the weekend, wearing a lot of rain gear. Also going to be dealing with 30 to 35 mile an hour sustained winds. And again, this is early in the week, right? A lot could change, but there is a nasty front coming through. And after it dumps all of that water, it's going to leave just cold temperatures, tons of wind. It's going to feel like we're in the Northeast or something like that. And it's going to make this golf course play unbelievably difficult. It could actually start to look a little bit like Bay Hill towards the end. So if that forecast holds, that cut line is completely out of play. It's going to, at the very least, look like what it did in 2017 when Siwoo Kim won at -10, and the cut line was actually +2. That year, of course, it played more difficult. There was a little bit of weather in play, but if we get the kind of conditions we're expecting, or at least the forecast says as of right now, could actually be even worse than that. Speaking of last year's champion, it was Justin Thomas who won at -14. We had a bet on him, ended up hitting on that, which was pretty nice. Who started out extremely rough. In fact, through Friday, he was at 1.6 over par. He was just well out of the golf, actually 4 over par. He was well out of the golf tournament. He was like 10 shots off the lead at that point or something like that. And I thought he was completely dead. He ended up roaring back there on the back nine on Friday, making the cut. On Saturday, shot 10 under par and just really closed it out there on Sunday. It was an unbelievable run up the leaderboard. Seeing it in person was quite special, to be quite honest with you, especially when you have an outright bet on someone. They get off to a bad start, you kind of write them off, and then you see them just roaring up the leaderboard. That was pretty sick. But he won at 14 under par. We had other past champions. In 2020, we didn't play. That was, of course, due to COVID. It was canceled after the first round. Hideki was the first round leader there. We did have the year before that, 2019, was Rory McIlroy at -16. We had a -1 cut that year. Webb Simpson won at -18, and that was a -1 cut line. And Siwoo, again, at -10 with the cut line at +2. So it has been consistent other than when we saw that weather. So if it weren't for the forecast this weekend, we'd be expecting a winner in that 15 to 20 under par range. We'd be expecting a cut line in like the even to -2 range, but that is not the case for this week. It's going to be a little bit of carnage just due to the weather itself. If we had those benign conditions or even just wind in play, not all that rain and those cold temperatures, it would be an easy golf course. But let's go ahead and talk about the specifics on how this course will play. All right, now for some course details. We have TPC Sawgrass, which is in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, just south of Jacksonville in the quote-unquote Florida swamps. It's a par 72, your usual setup for that. 4 par 3s, also 4 par 5s. And though the setup is usual, it could not be a more unique golf course. I mean, it's a Pete Dye special, so that's how you know it's going to be extremely strategic. But every single hole here has a personality. It has an approach that you have to take to it. Shots that are demanded. There aren't shots that are requested or merely suggested out here. There are shots that are demanded at TPC Sawgrass, and that's what makes it such a cool course to watch, especially to watch as a viewer. To play, it's a little bit more devilish. It's extremely taxing, of course, from the physical perspective, a lot of the shots that are required, but even more so from the mental perspective. And that's really why I think this course is a masterpiece. We're going to touch on this time and time again, especially during the hole-by-hole breakdown. The mental approach to this golf course is almost as important as the actual physical approach. So for Siwoo Kim to have won this event, everything went right for him that year. You could see it on TV. He never really got mad. He never let his emotions get the better of him. And that's why he was able to win this event. If he has that bad three putt where he ends up making a double bogey, that sort of thing, that is the type of thing that can derail someone here quickly. So the mental game is extremely important at this golf course. So it's no wonder that guys like Webb Simpson, Rory McIlroy, even Justin Thomas, who can be fiery at times, he's very good at channeling that, right? Getting over it very quickly. He doesn't carry that from hole to hole. He's somebody who's great at bouncing back, usually among the leaders on tour in the bounce back category when it comes to birdies. So those are the type of players that we want to be targeting. In fact, bounce back is a stat I'm looking at because this golf course is going to hit you with some uppercuts. It's extremely difficult. There's water hazards that are almost unavoidable with mishits. Of course, you're going to have mishits from time to time, and being able to suck it up, get over it, and move on to the next shot at this golf course is extremely important. So guys that are extremely emotional, and I would have put Siwoo into that category, are guys that I'm probably going to be fading this week, whether it's in the outright or the DFS market. It's just something that we've seen over the years. Let's talk about a few of the other specifics here. In terms of the yardage, we have a 7,256 yard golf course from the tips. Doesn't mean it'll play that long. Last year it played to an average of right around 7,180 yards, give or take a few yards there. Because they played a lot of the holes to the up tees, if we get super bad conditions, that's going to be probably even more so the case. It might even play closer to 7,100 yards. That would not surprise me. But at the same time, all of that added moisture, of course, the winds that'll be taking down your shot, not letting them travel as far, are also going to add distance. So whatever they take away in terms of the field staff from day to day here is probably going to be made up for by the conditions. The course in general plays soft this time of year. It was not always played in March. It was usually played in the middle of the summer, actually a little bit closer to after the Masters. And as a result, it played more firm, more fast, actually more difficult in the early part of the 2000s. But ever since they moved it to here to March, we've seen better conditions. We've seen winning scores approaching the 20 under par mark, which would have been completely unheard of for the other time of this event. So much like the November Masters, where they absolutely took that place nuclear. It was more of a bomb and gouge fest. Just get it out there. The rough wasn't penal at all. Just get it onto the green. They were extremely receptive. That effect that we saw at the Masters is very similar as what we see here to the Players. So this type of year does play a little bit easier. And if we get a lot of that moisture on Thursday and Friday, it should still be gettable, right? As long as the wind doesn't get super high. As of right now, it looks like it's going to be pretty average in terms of the wind. So you're still going to see some teeth in this golf course, but it's going to be extremely receptive. That means that the approach players are going to see a lot of advantage. They're going to be able to play target practice out there. So we'll touch on the key stats a little bit later here, but this weather forecast is going to change things significantly. In the past, where this golf course is difficult because it was so firm and fast, we might not have that factor this year. It might just be more about distance in your accuracy into these greens. If you think about it, it's going to play longer, right? Those bombers that are getting out there 320 yards, it's probably only going to go like 290 yards in these conditions, especially on the weekend when it gets super cold, maybe even shorter, which means it's going to be a driver in long iron fest at a golf course that's only 7,100 yards. So it really changes things for this year. That's why I'm taking so much time with this course breakdown, because it's going to be a unique year, right? Like when Siwoo Kim won, right? He was a unique winner. Usually it's somebody with a well-rounded game that's established on tour, that's played here a lot, that is extremely stable mentally, and it couldn't have been any different when Siwoo Kim won this golf tournament. So we're going to touch on a lot of that here to come. A few things to note about Pete Dye, who's the designer here. In my opinion, the greatest architect of all time. They're polarizing to say the least. There's definitely players that prefer his designs and some of them that hate them. Because there's so much strategy in play, because it's so taxing mentally, you're going to see specialists, guys like a Patrick Cantlay that are extremely successful on Pete Dye's surfaces. Also people that hate it, right? That eject themselves from their golf tournaments. Siwoo Kim is somebody that's routinely been good at these golf courses, so not a surprise to see him do well here, particularly when conditions got tough. Right? When it changes, he has to just get into that strategic mindset. Like, how am I going to play this golf course under these conditions? He has done that no matter the venue with Pete Dye. It seems to fit his eye. I'm not sure the reason for that. We'd have to interview him and ask him on that. Maybe someday I'll have the power to go out and do that. But it would really be interesting to hear why some of these guys like his courses so much and why they've had so much success here. But that's definitely something to keep an eye out for. Every single hole here, like I said, is demanding, if not mentally and physically. You have to really be thinking through every single shot. You're presented conflict on every single hole, whether it's off the tee, into the green. You're going to have some type of decision to be made on literally every single shot. So we'll talk about those specifics here in a second when we go through the hole by hole breakdown. Grass types on the greens, we have Tiff Eagle Bermuda. The greens are 5,328 square foot on average, which is about 750 square foot less than the average on tour. So relatively smaller than average greens, but they're not tiny. The fairways are Bermuda grass. They tend to be fair in terms of their width, right around tour average, which means they're right about tour average to hit. These greens are also about tour average to hit, even though they're slightly smaller than average and typically play firm and fast. The reason why is we have the best field in golf. Those averages are just taken for the field as a general, and when we have a better cross-section of players, no duh, there's going to be players that hit more greens. That's why that happens. A lot of people out there neglect that type of factor when they put that into their analysis. In general, if you were to have the same field strength that golf course with a regular field, right, not with a Players Championship field, it would be less than the tour average greens hit. So just keep that in mind. There's a bias there with the statistics. So they are smaller than average. They usually play firm and fast, but with the wet conditions expected, it's going to be easier to hit them. You're going to be a lot more receptive, particularly when the rainstorm's actually happening on Thursday and Friday, which is going to be for most of the day. The fairways, same exact story. So even though they are about tour average in terms of their width, when they get super wet like this, they are going to be even easier to hit. The rough is Bermuda grass. It has a rye overseed. I saw that myself over there at the API, and the rye was really what was getting super long. The thing about the API and the difference here at the Players Championship is it's not going to be 4-inch rough, right? They're going to have it at 2, maybe 2.5 inches to start the week. It might grow out to 3.5 inches by the end of the week, which will be penal, especially on Saturday and Sunday, but nothing like what we saw at the API. So keep that in mind. It's not going to be as gnarly of rough, which will keep scores relatively benign, right? You're not going to see that 10 to 11 par over score, but you are going to see some guys that have low pulls, particularly with some of the water hazards in play. Great, guys. On the screen, you can see the Pro Visualizer tool, what we used to go hole by hole here for each golf course. And I know this place like the back of my thumb. I've played here before. I've been to this golf course for multiple times for the Players Championship, and I love breaking it down. I love just watching the overhead views of this. So let's go ahead and break down hole number 1, which is probably the easiest par 4 you're going to get here, but it's not easy by any means. As you can see, there's a fairway bunker to the right, also a cross bunker, which can get some of the longer hitters on tour. It's probably out there about 340, 350 yards. So with the wet conditions we expect, probably out of play. The rough over here on the right isn't the worst place to hit it, as long as you don't hit it too far right into the trees. The tree line on the left is much more in play, and even on the corner over here, if you end up hitting a duck hook or something like that, could be in a world of trouble over there. Overall, the approach shot isn't that bad. It's a relatively large green for TPC Sawgrass. It has a ton of undulation, so depending on where they put the pin, could be a birdie hole, could end up being a bogey hole if they put it in one of the harder pin locations. So it all depends to the setup come this weekend. Hole number 2 is your first par 5. It's about as gettable as the par 5s get here. It's only 535 yards from the tips. It's playing a little bit longer due to the wet, damp conditions. It might not be reachable for the entire field. It usually is, though. If you hit a good drive out here, at about 300 yards, you're left with 240, 230 yards into this green. It does have a fairway bunker in play, also a lot of pot bunkers up near this green, so it's not the easiest eagle hole, but in terms of making a birdie, you should be doing so here at hole number 2 and setting yourself up for one of the tougher stretches in all of golf here with holes 3 through 6. Hole number 3 seems like a relatively easy hole, right? It's only 178 yards, which is short for a par 3 at this golf course. Other than 17, you're not going to find much shorter here in terms of your approach shots. But this green is one of the hardest to putt in the world. So even if you hit it up here to 10 to 15 feet, you're probably not making that putt. And there are a lot more 3 putts for bogey at this hole than there are 1 putts for birdie. Let's go to the next hole, which is hole number 4. Which is a borderline drivable par 4. There has been people in the past when they played the up tees that have tried to get it over that lake, usually unsuccessfully. Their lake's up there right around 350 yards. So if you do have somebody like Bryson DeChambeau who almost drove into that last year, that's going to be an issue. And something I just want to show here is I guess this front water's in play because they were playing the up tees up here last year and Bryson topped the ball into it. I got to see that in person. Nothing against Bryson, love the guy, but seeing a professional player top a ball into water about 10 yards off a tee was amusing to say the least. So this is a difficult hole because of the green. It's not easy by any means. It's got a lot of undulation. You can see it on the satellite imagery here, which just tells you how much slope is there. If you've been here for these course breakdowns before, usually we're not able to actually see that on camera, but that's how severe it is there. You have chipping areas. You have people that miss over here way to the right at times because they don't want to hit that pull hook and hit into the lake. It's geniusly added to the left of the screen and long. So of course, if you hit that super big pull, that type of thing, you'll be in there. So you see a lot of people bailing out to the right. Hole number 5 is a tough par 4. You have water in play, also bunkering. It's actually an elevated fairway shot, so it's actually up there about 10 to 15 yards uphill. It's man-made, of course, being in South Florida. You don't have any type of natural elevation. This water hazard in play actually got 4 or 5 people last year. John Rahm hit a tee shot in there. Same thing with DJ. They have a ton of power, obviously. That's why they were able to get it there. But most players will hit it out here right around 300 yards, have a mid-iron into this green. It's an elevated green. There's a little bit of a valley down here. Then it goes back up to the green. This bunker is not necessarily in play. These pot bunkers aren't really in play either unless you just absolutely shank and miss right. The thing is, though, if you have that miss hit to the right, a slice, something like that, you're in a world of hurt. for whatever reason, Pete Dye wanted to make that miss, which is already a bad miss, probably looking at a bogey at best, like a double or a triple bogey at best. That's what he was trying to do over here. So as you can see, there's a huge emphasis on your approach play here, which we'll get to our key stats after we do this hole by hole breakdown. Hole number 6 is a relatively easy par 4, and I say that lightly because of course the green's also really hard to putt. From a ball striking perspective though, most guys are just going to hit iron off of this tee. You can see the Pro Visualizer has it out here at 285. So for most players, that's a 3-wood at most, if not a driving iron, like I said. And you're going to have a wedge in. So no one's going to try and get it out there with a driver. At least no one tried to do it there in 2021. And this hole is birdieable. The issue is the green's also extremely difficult. So much like the first par 3 that we saw over there at hole number 3, even though you're presented with a relatively simple hole with the ball striking, he does try and trip you up with that short game. It shows the importance of having a well-rounded game, right? You can't just be an extremely good ball striker and win here. You're also going to have the short game, right? So when Sergio Garcia won this event, he had one of his best putting weeks to date. That was important for him, right? You still have to be able to make your putts here. Hole number 7 is one of the hardest holes on the golf course. Off the tee, it's the hardest off the tee shot. You have this lake over here to the left. This woods over here to the right is extremely much, a lot of people hit over there. Let's just say it's in play because people get scared of the water. They even get scared of this fairway bunker, which you get some pretty nasty lies because it's sloped pretty heavily from right to left. So a lot of people bail out. They end up hitting over in the trees, which are much closer to the fairway than it looks here on the satellite imagery. And most of them are just pitching out sideways. Unless, of course, you're Jordan Spieth, who was over here last year. I was following him. This is where the cart path is for the fans. And he hit into the fan section over here. And he went over the trees, like through a tiny little opening somewhere in the trees there, and hit it to about 2 feet and birdied the hole. So unless you're Jordan Spieth, if you hit it in there, you're probably looking at bogey at best. And this is one of the more difficult holes on the golf course. The green's also relatively difficult, as pretty much all of them here are at TPC Sawgrass. Hole number 8 is a long par 3. A ton of bogeys are made here because, of course, you have a ton of pot bunkers, which means any misses long are probably going to end up in a pot bunker. That pot bunker short in the middle is just cosmetic more than anything. But even your misses to the left and right, you're dealing with a really difficult shot. It's an elevated green, has a ton of undulation to it. This is routinely among the top 5 holes here in terms of difficulty from year in and year out. Hole number 5 is your second par 5 on the front, and this really is a 3-shotter. I mean, you're not really going to see anyone hit this green into and eagle it. You might see one guy the entire week do so. It's only 580 yards, so it's not really the distance. It's more the angles, because you can see out here this is 300 yards. Unless you hit it exactly 300 yards and in the dead center of the fairway over here to the right, you're not going to have a shot at this green. It's uphill. These trees over here are much larger than you'd expect. They completely make the shot blind into this green. You actually have to hit a swooping draw into it. You can't hit the shot over those trees. They'll swallow up the shot. I've seen it time and time again. So unless you get it out here like 340 yards, like way out here to the left, you see this is out here 360. You're going to see some guys hit it out there because it is sloped down in that direction. Then you have to hit a swooping draw around. Or, of course, if you're a lefty like Bubba Watson, I've seen him do this before, hit a swooping slice around the corner. No one ends up hitting the green. It always ends up being in that, let's just go up to the green, show you guys what I'm talking about. A lot of shots end up in the fairway bunker to the left over here, and they try to go for it because they can't get it around that tree. Or if they do end up getting it around the patches of trees and the bunkering right here, they end up in these pot bunkers to the right. There's a few other pot bunkers over there that you can't see on the imagery, or way over here to the left. It's just usually not a good situation. At the best on hole number 9, you're making a birdie. And a lot of people end up bogeying the hole, which is surprising to say the least, especially when you're trying to take advantage of those par 5s. Hole number 10 is just like hole number 1. You have the fairway bunker on one side. It's a dog-legged fairway from right to left. So as you can see, you have to be able to hit from left to right at this golf course and from right to left. It's demanded on every single hole, a shot in either direction, which also means that if you're somebody like a Dustin Johnson who only hits it from left to right, this is not a golf course for you, right? You're going to run into trouble when you have a hole like this. I guess this isn't the best hole specifically because you can get away with hitting it over there to the right. But on some of the holes here, when you're demanded to hit a draw, he runs into a lot of problems at TPC Sawgrass. That's probably why he hasn't had all that much success. So if you get it out here in hole number 10, you still do only have a wedge into this green, but much like hole number 1, one of the more difficult greens on the golf course. Hole number 11 is also a par 5, so much like hole number 2, you're given a chance to get a birdie early, but much like hole number 2, It's almost 600 yards, and it's going to play nearly that with the wet conditions we're expecting. This fairway bunker in the left, if you hit into it, it's a layup at the very best. You might be able to lay up over here if you have a decent lie, but more than likely you're just trying to pitch it down the fairway, set yourself up over the water into this green. So you're looking at most people making birdie here at best. You are going to see more eagles at this hole than what you saw for hole number 2. Hole number 2 and hole number 11 are by far the most eagleable holes at this entire golf course. So some of the longest hitters like Rory McIlroy that have won here in the past, even Webb Simpson, who had a really good week on the par 5s that week, that's really how they made their heyday. Hole number 4 is borderline drivable. It's 568 yards. A lot of times they play it from this tee up here, which is about 20 yards closer. And Bryson DeChambeau went for it every single day, had a lot of success doing so, took this bunker out of play completely. A lot of times just had a little wedge into this green. It's something that when I'm there in person, I'm going to be watching a lot. It's a lot of fun to watch. It's also downhill, so it is 568 yards, but it plays a little bit shorter than that. It's typically also downwind. So I do like this hole. Pete Dye has said that actually wanted to make this a par 3. Of course, the tee boxes wouldn't have been nearly as far back, but as of right now is a par 4 and a hole where if you can hit a really solid drive, you're going to have a few people that actually drive this green. Probably a super easy birdie. You're not going to see that many eagles, maybe 1, maybe 2 for the entire week, but a fun hole nonetheless. Let's go ahead to hole number 13, which is a 184-yard par 3. It's difficult because you have this water in play on the left. Of course, any shots over here bailing out to the right are also difficult due to the sloping on the green. A lot of times on Sunday, the pin location is here on the back left. On day 1, it's going to be here on the front right, probably more of a birdie hole than anything, but like all the par 3s here at TPC Sawgrass, a lot of undulation and misses are going to be penalized heavily. This is another S-shaped hole. It's more of a snake shot hole. Here in number 14, it's a long par 4. It's a really easy hole to make bogey on, especially if you get over here to the fairway bunker on the left, or of course over here in the junk on the right. There's also a really hard green here. It's just something that's a recurring theme at this golf course. Pop bunkers over the green, also a recurring theme for a Pete Dye golf course. And of course the fairway bunker that goes the whole way up to the green. Hole number 15 is another par 4. It's really difficult. The drive here is among the most difficult on the PGA Tour. You have to hit a fade here to set up a shot into this green. It's also a relatively narrow fairway. A lot of people that can't get their ball to slice or can't get their ball to fade end up in the trees over here, having to pitch out and are usually looking at bogey at the very best. Hole 16 is the easiest par 5 if you're an extremely good ball striker, but it's also the one with the most risk. So you are going to see quite a few eagles here, especially on Sunday with the Sunday pin location. You make it as accessible as humanly possible. So you can get your drive out here actually a lot farther than this. So you can get it out here probably like 330, 340 yards. You can hit a drive right around the thing here. This is a lake over here. I know it's green. I don't know why. And over here to the green, you're going to have right about 190 yards. So that's why I say it's the most gettable of the par 5s. But at the same time, if you can't hit that draw around the corner, you're going to be laying up to right around this spot here, like they have it here on the Pro Visualizer. And the green is massive. So on Sunday, they're going to have it usually back here in the back right, or sometimes over here in the front right. Ooh, didn't mean to do that. But they'll have it in the front right of that green. I'll get over there in a second. Yeah, there we go. So they'll have it here in like the front right over here, which isn't as easy to make eagle on, but it's also easy to make a bunch of birdies there. Overall, this is a gettable hole as long as you have your ball striking with you, but of course any mishits can end up in the water over here. And a lot of times when you're pitching from the side of the screen, if you get a really bad lie, particularly in like the pop bunker or something like that, you'll see guys blade it into the water. Definitely something that you'll see happen this week. Hole 17 is the most iconic hole in golf. I can't really do it justice here on the Pro Visualizer, but it's the Stadium par 3 17th, the island green, one of the hardest shots in all of golf, even though it's only 144 yards. There's a ton of undulation right here from back to front. Over here, you have a lot of undulation from this direction as well. The Sunday pin location is going to be right here. It's not letting me move the pin location, but it's going to be right here. You see that little speck. First few days, you're going to have a few on this front shelf. You might even have one in the back middle over here. But no matter where they put it, the water comes into play, and it's by far the most entertaining hole to watch in person. And hole number 18 is just as difficult because you have this lake on the left. It's one of the more interesting finishing holes that we have here on the PGA Tour. It demands a draw. You have to hit a draw and take on this water to have any shot of a reasonable approach shot into this green. Everything is sloped from right to left here. So the further left that you are here, the more you can hit it into that upslope and stop the ball near the pin. The further right you are, the more the slope is going to take your ball and try and get it into that bunker or, of course, into the water. So as I said, you have to hit a draw here. It's also why Justin Thomas hit his tee shot and ended up hitting it right about here. He had about 150 yards into the green, a perfect angle into the green, and when he hit that shot, he really locked up the golf tournament. And now for our key stats for analysis. We're going to go through our top 3 in detail, and then I'll give you guys some of the other periphery stats I'm looking at. But at number 1, we have shots gained approach, which is a no-brainer at any Pete Dye track. While there's plenty to worry about off the tee in terms of hazards, there might even arguably be more into these greens, whether it's the deep Bermuda rough, which you see at 3 to 4 inches around this venue, whether it's the pop bunkers that Pete Dye loves to use, which make some of your sand shots nearly impossible. A lot of times you're just pitching out sideways. Whether it's some of the water hazards in play, of course, a lot of the undulation on these greens that lead to pretty severe chipping areas. There is a ton of penalty to be had when you don't hit a perfect shot at this golf course. So having solid approach play is always really what distinguishes the field. Every single winner here is an elite iron player, or at least in one point of their career was an elite iron player. That's really the key differentiating factor at this venue, as pretty much like I said before, at every Pete Dye golf course. He's somebody who prioritizes precision over distance. You're going to see that off the tee as well when we talk about shots gained off the tee at number 3. But overall, it's something that I'm weighing extremely the most in my modeling this week, and that's something that you'll see from week to week anyways on this channel, but even more so at this type of venue. At number 2, we have shots gained putting on Bermuda grass, and as is constant here in the Florida swing, putting on TIF equal Bermuda is a mainstay, something that you absolutely have to have success down here. And even though this is a tough track, this is definitely slightly more scoreable than what we saw at the Honda Classic, or of course last week at the Carnage at the API. So being able to make those 10 to 15 footers for birdie, to be able to take this thing to 10 to 15 under, even 20 under historically at the Players Championship, has won this event, right? That's what we've seen win it. Now this year, because of some of the weather, we're going to see a winning score that is a lot lower than what we're used to seeing over the years. But either way, making those 10 to 15 footers, whether they're for birdie or they're for par this week, on some of the trickiest greens in all of the PGA Tour is of course going to be a differentiating factor. In fact, last year, JT's putting is really what snapped him out of his funk. It's what really took him, had that breakthrough victory for him. He went out there, he did his usual thing with the ball striking, particularly for Friday through Sunday. Thursday was pretty rough for him in both categories, but the putting also was there. He gained on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to the field with his putting, and that's really why he ended up winning. And number 3, we have shots gained off the tee. Like I said before, for as many hazards as there are into greens here, there's also just as many off the tee. There's a lot of water hazards in play. There's sand bunkers, fairway bunkers on literally every single hole, pretty much for every single shot that you're hitting. A lot of them are extremely penal. They're deep. They have a lot of cantering to them, a lot of undulation and whatnot. And overall, being able to drive the ball accurately, but also with distance, is going to be a factor I'm looking at. So the driving accuracy is always something that people are looking at TPC Sawgrass. It's an obvious factor year in and year out, but driving distance this year is also going to be a heavy factor just because of the wet conditions. We know it's already playing longer because it's playing in March rather than later in the year like it used to, but we're also dealing with a golf course that's 7,300 yards that might be playing closer to 7,700 or 7,800 yards. Add in the wind, it might even be playing close to 8,000 yards. It really makes that much of a difference. So overall, driving distance is something I'm going to be looking at pretty heavily this week, along, of course, with the usual driving accuracy, which dominates a lot of people's analysis at this course. A few other key stats I'm looking at: shots gained at Pete Dye golf courses. Like I said before, there's guys that love this venue that tend to have a lot of success here and at other Pete Dye venues, much like a Siwoo Kim, Pete Dye, those type of, not Pete Dye, sorry, Webb Simpson. I don't know why I misconstrued those two. We're also taking a look at shots gained at the Florida swing. This time of year, people tend to get hot. People have a lot of success at these difficult golf courses where we have that wind, really fast, firm greens. So I am taking a look at people's shots gained at the Valspar Championship, Honda Classic, API, and Players Championship, obviously. Shots gained around the green on Bermuda, I'm also taking an extra look at this week. Par 5 scoring is weighted a little bit heavier in my model this week. Same thing with the 150 to 175 yard range when it comes to the approach buckets. 3-putt avoidance is also something a little bit boosted, and same thing for the 175 to 200 yard range for the approach shots. All right, and now finally for our comp courses for this week. Number 1 is going to be Bay Hill Club and Lodge, what I was just at yesterday, walking the grounds there on Sunday. It's a Florida course. Of course, we have the Bermuda grass greens, fairway and rough, a similar length and firmness of the greens, same length, rough, that type of thing. But Bay Hill is a little bit more of a penal version of TPC Sawgrass. A lot of the trends that we see in the winners from course to course, of course, for our analysis from course to course, remain the same. Looking for players that have an emphasis on their ball striking, also with their putting on Bermuda grass, and most importantly, on those Sunday conditions, Saturday, Sunday, can keep themselves out of that gnarly rough, hit some clutch approach shots, and make putts on Bermuda grass, like I said. Next up, we have Augusta National, the home of the Masters, and it really has a definite visual parallel. If you were to walk around Augusta National and then walk around TPC Sawgrass, I think the water would be a lot more prominent at TPC Sawgrass, but from especially the tree side, the pine straw, the perfectly manicured fairways and greens with a ton of undulation on them, especially in the fairways, just the scenery in general, you'd have a hard time distinguishing between the two. So I use it as a comp course. You definitely have a lot of shot making that goes into shots at Augusta National, much like what you have here at TPC Sawgrass. You also have firm, fast, undulating greens, right? The guys that are able to putt well at Augusta National also tend to putt well here at TPC Sawgrass. And now finally, PGA National, the champion course. It's another part of this 3-event stretch down here in Florida that are extremely comparable courses, that being the Honda, the API, and the Players. It also has abundance of water in play, like we see here at TPC Sawgrass. And it also has the heavily undulating greens, fairways, windy conditions. As always, you're seeing here in Florida. That's why you see a lot of parallels from golf course to golf course, and also a lot of reliance on the ball striking, right? We were looking at a lot of approach players, off the tee players there at Honda Classic. Sepp Straka was number 1 in driving accuracy. He was number 3 in green and regulation percentage. No wonder he ended up winning that week. So it's going to be a very similar skill set that wins at that golf course and that wins at this golf course. The issue, of course, is the difference in field strength. So we have to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt there, but the guys that tend to perform well there are going to have a little bit of a boost in my modeling this week. That is all I've got for this week's course breakdown. Before you go on and get out of here, go ahead and let me know down in the comments what you've got as the winning score this week. For me, I'm going to take -9. I'll remind you guys about the weather in play, whether it's the rain on Thursday or Friday, or of course the wind and cold weather over the weekend. But make sure you guys go ahead and let me know what you've got down below. We're going to have even more content coming throughout the week, whether it's our usual fantasy golf content for Draftkings DFS dropping throughout today and tomorrow. We're also going to have a Wednesday live report from the golf course, so look forward to that. I'll be walking the golf course during the Pro-Am on Wednesday, coming back to the hotel, recording something for you guys, going over what I saw, what you guys can expect for the weekend. We'll also have our usual Wednesday DFS live stream that'll be at 7 p.m. I may actually do the report from the course during the live stream, so we'll have to figure out the timing on that. I'll be able to give you guys more clarification as we get closer there, but we'll be able to give you guys all of your usual DFS content and, of course, the extra content live from the venue. We'll have our prize pick stuff dropping throughout the weekend, showdown content as well, and may also condense that into a singular show just so because I'll be on the road. Also, don't want to be spending all my time doing content because I will be out there with a few buddies. So I want to be going out to dinner, doing that type of thing. So still going to have content out for you guys, but might be in a little bit of a different format. So look forward to all of that. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, make sure you do so you don't miss any of that to come. Make sure you like the video as well. Until next time, guys, let's have ourselves a week, and best of luck this week.